Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
It must be Friday, boys and girls, because as always, the retrospective is the thing in which you'll catch the conscience of the king. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals. We pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to make that jump and stretch and assume that you do because you're listening right now. And if you are, hit subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Give us the old 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the TikTok, and God knows where else at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large, because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So do us that kindness and pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a fun one. We're sitting down with a friend of the show, the one and only Mr. Norm Wilner, who, as you already well know, is a Canadian programmer over at TIFF and does a variety of other jobs over at that fantastic place. Former journalist, well, current journalist still. He has his own site and his own newsletter for home entertainment stuff to keep himself entertained. But in this instance, he's keeping us entertained because he is launching a brand new retrospective of films. It's from a series called The Disreputables, which is starting tonight at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, and it's kind of celebrating the B movie and the importance thereof, and really how it ties into so many things that go on in our day-to-day lives, and sort of reflects society. There's 8 films. It's playing for the entire month. There's some really fun stuff in here, and it starts tonight. I'll be there to go see Blue Steel, Catherine Bigelow's Blue Steel, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. And well, enough of my rambling. You kind of want to hear Norm talk about this because some of these selections he made are just absolutely inspired. And as always, just as a reminder that if you are a TIFF member, Cinematech programming, which is what this qualifies under, is free for members. So get down there, fill the place up, and have a good time watching cinema. But first, enjoy our talk with Norm because, as always, it's a darn good one. Yeah, just to kick this off officially, I mean, obviously, thank you again, friend of the show, Mr. Norm Wilner. Thank you for the time today, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad to do this. It's nice to talk to people.
No, it's funny because, I mean, obviously, like, before we started, we were talking a little bit about the festival, and I mean, in the wake of the festival, I'm like, in my brain, I'm always like, oh, there's retrospective stuff, there's stuff going on. I better, start looking and seeing what's going on. And then I see this program and the Disreputables, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then it's starting off with this well-written essay about Elia Kazan and On the Waterfront and Joseph McCarthy, and then all of a sudden we're talking about Chud. How
it's a straight line.
Did you manage to go from there to here?
Well, I mean, in between McCarthy in between On the Waterfront and Chud, there's Body Snatchers.
Yes.
Right?
So
yeah. The idea that pulp cinema has always been better at making real world situations stick in the public consciousness. So, On the Waterfront was largely seen as Elia Kazan's mea culpa or justification, depending on which side you were on, for naming names to the House Un-American Committee's investigation and giving McCarthy the communist red meat that he wanted. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers comes along the same year, 1954, and spins a story about people being replaced from the inside out by, communists, basically, by sleeper agents who all want the same thing and do it unemotionally and will roll over freedoms to get it. And that's the metaphor that's hung around a lot longer than Marlon Brando. Like now, if you remember On the Waterfront at all, people tend to remember it. I mean, admittedly, it's it's 65 years old. God, no, it's almost 70 years old. But if anybody remembers it now, it's because John Belushi did the could have been a contender speech in Saturday Night Live. Right? That's all anybody remembers. But Invasion of the Body Snatchers keeps coming back. There's, I think, 5 official adaptations and dozens of unofficial ones of Jack Finney's book, which he said was not a metaphor for the communist threat, but certainly the first film, the one that Don Siegel made in 1954, you can't read it as anything else. So it's this fascinating, or 56, is it 56? But it's this fascinating use of pulp and genre to discuss something that was on everybody's minds and give it a little bit of a safe remove through the idea of the fantastic. And then we looked at a bunch of films in the 80s that were playing the same game about the kind of a lot of them were about regulatory rollback, which I find absolutely fascinating. Like Chud is about gentrification, but it's also about contaminated hazard. The real meaning of Chud is that it's about the disposal of toxic waste in urban settings without any concern for the people who live there. RoboCop basically predicts the privatization and militarization of the police, among a whole bunch of other things. Like the only thing missing in RoboCop is cell phones. Otherwise, it's a freaking documentary of the present day.
More or less, right?
And then Blue Steel, we realized, was a movie which I've always loved and have watched disappear through the memory holes of various generations. But it's Catherine Bigelow's follow-up to Near Dark, and it is a cop thriller about the misogyny baked into policing and the American cop thriller. So with Jamie Lee Curtis as the lead, she's turning a mirror on the very genre that you're watching and also telling you where things are going to go. It's also there's a really clear gaslighting metaphor that runs through the entire picture, which like I hadn't even remembered was there, but is absolutely there. So we found 8 movies. There were a few more, but we tried to focus on the films that were produced outside of studio productions, like sort of like movies that were made to plug a hole in a schedule for a couple of B pictures, or when the video boom started, were just commissioned in order to be released on video, so that New World Pictures would have a monster movie from Larry Cohen. It's just that he made one about Killer Yogurt, which is also about corporate espionage and the FDA rollbacks under Reagan. A lot of them were about rollbacks under Reagan because that was happening in the 80s, and it becomes a dominant narrative thread through a lot of horror films, because all they're doing is giving you the worst case scenario of any one of these things, right? It's what if this keeps happening, and this is what we end up with. And that was just fun. And then we found out we could get some on 35 millimeter instead of video. And then we found out that the rights to a couple of them were just mysteries. No one knows where the prints of the stuff are. We have to screen that one digitally because apparently Larry Cohen took all the materials with him. But we've got it. We're screening it, and it's going to be a really fun time. And it was just great to revisit my childhood, basically, and go back to the stuff that was playing when I was discovering movies, genre films, mostly through DVD, through VHS and Laserdisc at the time.
And that's just
I date myself.
Yeah, but so many of these are really so prescient to sort of not just the time of when they were made, because obviously so many of these are childs of the 80s, obviously, but they're movies that were made on the brink of making stuff strictly for the shelf.
Yeah.
Which kind of fascinates me.
Yeah, we briefly toyed with the idea of a complete, like a Vestron video series where they're just movies that don't exist anymore, really. But now Lionsgate has the rights and they're rolling them out in these weird little Blu-ray special editions, which are great. There's one of Blue Steel coming out in November, as it happens.
That's right, yeah.
But we have it first, and we have it on 35.
No, that leads to the next question. Like, I'm kind of curious, as you're narrowing this down, I've got to imagine, since I've known you long enough, and you are a film fan at heart, being in this job that you are now, it must have been a little bit of a giggly moment to be like, oh, I finally get my own little retrospective program. Like, was it a happy, talk to me a little bit about just sort of getting that moment to be able to do a little retrospective thing of your own, because I know you've introduced screenings, you've done other things, but this one feels like it's you.
It's the first one that I've actually assembled myself I mean, I had help obviously because the Cinematheque team is incredible, and I would not have been able to find any of these materials on my own. We would be showing my Blu-ray collection. Um, but and I think they'd be open to that. But the experience of it has been great. Yeah, it's just I've never been able to curate before. I mean, short of the Canadian program that we set up
Right.
between Kelly and myself, which we put together. But it's different when you're dealing with films that you watched when you were younger, and you get to revisit and reevaluate. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. There were a couple of films we wanted that we couldn't get. There were a couple of films that I didn't want that were kind of available. And it's like, well, it's not really fair to the other movies to put in a ringer. So we ended up there was a last minute substitution when something just simply wasn't available, but we ended up programming Real Genius, which as it turns out not only holds up as a genuinely sweet natured counter narrative to the Revenge of the Nerds thing that was going on, but also predicts drone strikes and is funny. So yay for that. Yay for Real Genius. Good for Martha Coolidge.
What is it about these genre movies, especially from the 80s, that are so prescient? Because I mean, you look at Blue Steel, I mean, in the wake of Me Too, that it feels so relevant. I mean, you look at The Running Man and just sort of
reality television. It predicts Survivor. It's
exactly
remarkable. Although it may have also created, like, that's the thing, right? The question is
the chicken and the egg.
Yeah. Do these movies predict where culture is going, or did we get there because these movies provided the roadmap? RoboCop, I think, is one where everything in it that played as hysterically funny satire in 1987 now plays as, ooh, yeah, oh yeah, saw that coming, huh? Ooh, oh dear God. And The Running Man is just so much of a cartoon that you can see there's a whole bunch of like Fox Network game shows that try to copy its aesthetic and didn't quite understand that what the fans are cheering for is death and violence and humiliation. They're, like stuff like Deal or No Deal, where the worst thing that can happen is, oh, you picked the wrong briefcase, but it's lit and shot like The Running Man, which is really fascinating. I think for the most part, the budgets were suddenly there. Like there was a level of access that resourceful weirdos had in the 80s that they didn't have in the 70s and especially in the 60s, because B movies were B movies, and there was no budget for anything other than, some gore effects and one monster. Think about the way that drive-in pictures evolved from the 50s to the 60s and then kind of went away entirely in the 70s, because the 70s was the time of like corporate mergers taking over movie studios and all-star productions, and all of a sudden genre got serious. Things like, well, I mean, it wasn't really serious, but things like The Swarm and Meteor, disaster movies, really kind of broke the B movie for a while. And then in the 80s, they scaled back down again because the video boom made it possible to, really not even release a movie. By the mid 80s, you could put a film in 2 theaters, one in New York and one in California, and then say nationwide theatrical release, and you put it on VHS and beta, and it was just in stores a month later. But that became the norm by the late 80s. These are the films that were being designed to be put into theaters, often by real filmmakers and real studios. New Line Cinema releasing The Hidden, and Orion releasing RoboCop, and MGM, I think, did end up distributing Blue Steel, although they weren't supposed to originally. It was produced for somebody else, and it got picked up. But all of these movies got in front of audiences in theaters before they went on to their long, long lives on video and on cable. So what you saw was this explosion of content. I hate saying content, but that's the beginning of it. That's when
it is such a dirty word, isn't it?
Absolutely. But this is when people started treating movies as product in a way that had never been done before, and invented the home video industry, where like somebody like Charles Band could make movies that would never be projected theatrically because they'd look like garbage. But at 480 or 425 or whatever VHS resolution was, it's fine, put it out. 325. They look terrible, but it was like a bad bulb in a drive-in. Like if the darker it was, the less bad the visual effects looked, and it was just like that for VHS. You could get away with terrible rear projection or video compositing. Think about the way the X-Files first seasons looked before they switched.
Oh my God,
film,
yeah.
right? Like that's just how things were back then. People accepted less than, and these are the ones that tried for something that used the umbrella of, make it for $175,000 and I don't care what you do as long as there's a monster in it. that's where you get Larry Cohen deciding to make a movie about the rollback of FDA restrictions and the rise of the militia in the stuff, which everybody forgets. Like, Paul Sorvino's character is running a militia. He is the good guy. He saves the day. And of course, it's before Oklahoma City and it's before 9/11, and all this stuff is sort of to be laughed at. But it also kind of predicts the way that that lifestyle will infect America, where the militarization of casual gun ownership, like, well, I got an AR, whatever, because I can, and he's the good guy because Larry Cohen thinks it's funny. And I mean, then it was.
And I mean, it's so weird just to see this list of directors that you've assembled because, I mean, on one end, there's a Catherine Bigelow, there's a Paul Verhoeven, there's a Carpenter, and even somebody like Cohen, who has been so prolific with some of his stuff. But I mean, then on the flip side of it, I mean, as much as I love Real Genius and Valley Girl, like Martha Coolidge kind of went away in the mid 90s in terms of being I want to say relevant filmmaker. And I mean, I'm sorry, but the guy who directed, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is probably not someone who qualifies as someone who's going to have sort of that iconic career. And even someone with like Paul Michael Glaser, who, coming off, he made this movie more or less, and then kind of went away again.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of them went into TV, which was also a thing that was happening in the 90s. Jack Shoulder, who made Nightmare 2 and The Hidden, I think he directed like 60 episodes of Lost or something. It's a ludicrous number. Because he was capable of delivering quickly and on budget. And so you become a very you become a very desirable filmmaker in television at that time, when there were still just a handful of people that were doing, quote unquote, prestige TV in the 90s. Martha Coolidge directed a bunch of TV. I mean, she made Rambling Rose right after, well, not right after Real Genius, but she would work with actors and get them Oscar nominations or Emmy nominations. And just, apparently that was a decent career. Not everybody wants to make one movie every 2 or 3 years. Some people just like to keep working. Then there's like Douglas Cheek, who made Chud and is entirely forgotten, but again, kicked around. He not everybody got to be Catherine Bigelow and toil in relative obscurity for 25 years before making an Oscar winner.
No, and it shows that separation between sort of the auteur and the working director. Because again, everyone always thinks that if you're directing a film, you're this artiste and you're this auteur. It's like, yeah, they're artists, but they're also working 9 to 5, and they're doing like there is definitely a bit of a difference.
Yeah, to come back to The Hidden, I think you need somebody with a slightly anonymous style like Jack Shoulder to make the movie as well as it turned out. Because if they were trying harder to do the effects of the alien stuff, there's 2 special effects shots in The Hidden that aren't prosthetics or explosions. There's just one shot of the Uggy. There's 2. And then there's that glowing. So there's 3 effect shots, because there's a glowing thing at the end too that I always forget about. But that's an optical. And by concentrating on making a cop movie where the most obvious indicator that somebody's an alien is just the tongues coming out at the very beginning of a possession. Like all the actors do this one thing, which is they sort of go, they taste the air after the alien takes them over, and that's the common thread. And once you see it, it's like, that is the most economical thing in the world. It's easier than a bump on the face or some kind of obvious twitch. It's just this little thing and a little bit of music that tells you, oh, that's what's going on here. And you shoot the film like a cop movie. Like that opening car chase is incredibly well done. And someone trying too hard to push the David Lynch connection by having Kyle MacLachlan show up as somebody who is a little weird and out of place, like Jeffrey Beaumont in Blue Velvet. Like, this is his next film. Pushing that too hard would give the game away. Like, pushing it into the genre stuff, to the sci-fi stuff, would actually ruin it. I love The Hidden because it is, I mean, it's, my angle on it is that it not only predicts influencer culture, but the rise of Donald Trump. I mean, the alien who just wants to be applauded. The only thing it cares about is if people like it, and then decides to run for president. This is 1987. This is like dead on. But also this character shows up, 3 months before Wall Street opened, before Gordon Gekko.
Yeah.
We had this, and it's the same basic principle. It's just conspicuous consumption, instant gratification, mindless violence, and the destruction of anybody who gets in your way. This is it is the ultimate 80s movie. It just happens to be an alien showing us what we're doing wrong. But the dialogue is the thing that I love about it, because the exposition is all in the dialogue. There's one exchange between the two aliens about, well, this is so much better than the Alterians. They're a filthy people. And it tells you everything. It gives you everything you need to know about these characters. They've been chasing each other so long that they're just making wisecracks at each other about how boring it is that they're chasing each other again. But there's also a throwaway line of dialogue in a car dealership about it's just before the alien comes in and steals a Lamborghini. A regular human person and a regular human car salesman are talking to each other, and the throwaway dialogue is basically, it's just like, this thing does 100 in the city. Yeah, in the city. Where else? And it's just about the casual contempt that's already seeping into Los Angeles in 1987 from the Reagan years and the embrace of capitalism. It's basically the first late capitalism film. Or maybe RoboCop is, it came out earlier. But it's one of those things where if you look back, you see the seeds of everything we're dealing with. These movies predicted it, and that's why we get to celebrate them again.
Well, and there's a sardonic humor in there as well, that
laughing through the graveyard. We're doomed.
Well, no, but I mean, that doesn't always get appreciated. And I mean, it's something that, at least from we're maybe seeing a little bit more of, because I mean, I think of something that you worked on, at the festival with the, humanist vampire seeks, suicidal, consenting suicidal person. It has that spirit. Do you think sort of the indie genre stuff is starting to embrace a little bit more of that, I guess, I don't give a fuck kind of sentimentality that so many of these 80 movies did?
I don't know that it ever went away. I mean, it's just punk rock, right? It's the same thing where if you don't have a lot of money, you have to make a statement. If you don't have flash, you have to have a message, and you got to grab people. So I think it's definitely true that we are more predisposed to see it now. And the overwhelming attitude of general despair has shifted into, we might as well laugh because otherwise we'll cry. And I think that's something we're seeing a lot of now. But the nihilism that underlies a lot of horror and science fiction, that's Body Snatchers, right? That's never gone away. Yeah. That goes back to the 50s. They're after you, you're next. And everybody forgets, I mentioned this in the essay, I think it's still in there. Everybody forgets Body Snatchers has an optimistic ending where someone finally believes Kevin McCarthy, but nobody remembers that. Everybody remembers the scene of him screaming into the camera, because that's the thing we all respond to.
Yeah. What is it about the pulp of these movies that, speaks to audiences and speaks to people in general? Because I mean, even when people go awards contenders in this or important cinema, it's like we're not remembering terms of endearment or some sort of wrought, really political, statement of a drama in the same kind of light as we do RoboCop or Chud. It's like they don't have the same kind of sociological impact that these genre films do.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the most basic level, those movies don't have awesome posters, right? Like, you just walking by them in the theater, you see a monster coming up through a manhole, or you see Peter Weller in the suit in RoboCop, and you're like, oh, I got to see that. And I love Terms of Endearment. I think it's also weirdly the first Netflix movie in a really strange way, because it's made with television values, but at a cinematic scale by James L. Brooks, who was coming out of TV. And it's, if you look back now, and this might be another program for next year, if you look back now, you can see this is the thing that everybody's chasing 40 years later, which is really weird. Because The Right Stuff is right there. Like, that's a proper movie.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But the thing that people think they want versus the thing they actually want, that comes back in around here too, because we do want monster movies because they make everything really simple. We want clear-cut villains and heroes. We want stories of good guys and bad guys. And these films give you all of those things, but they paint outside the box. They're doing all kinds of stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and some part of your brain is going, well, I don't like this scene. I'm really curious to see how Blue Steel plays with a modern audience, because there's some stuff in there that is downright icky. Problematic is one thing, but the film knows what it's doing. Catherine Bigelow is absolutely turning the lens on the audience in a way that they don't like, and she did it in Strange Days as well.
Yeah.
Really horrifying scene that everyone forgets is there, but it's in there. And Blue Steel is more about gaslighting and the general sense that it's easier to write off a woman as hysterical than it is to actually listen to her. even when someone is running around carving her name on bullet casings and shooting people, they still don't buy it because, well, she's probably doing it. It's absolutely fascinating to watch this film now and realize that everything in it is legitimate. And then you look back at the reviews and say, oh, that's all hysterical and preposterous, and none of this would ever happen. It's like, guys, you missed it. You just missed it. Accept that. Acknowledge it. I probably did too, but I loved it. I knew what it was doing, and it's like it's what Adam Naiman says about Showgirl. When people try to laugh it off as a bad idea, it's like, you've seen RoboCop and Total Recall and all of Paul Verhoeven's other movies. What makes you think he didn't mean to do this way? This is deliberate. Whether you like it or not, that's a different thing. But Blue Steel is absolutely a messy, ugly unpacking of everything that Catherine Bigelow and Eric Red thought was weird about cop movies. And then, to marry it to what happened 10, 20 years later with The Hurt Locker, where people are saying, oh, it's pro-military, or with Zero Dark 30, where it's like it's pro-torture. Well, no, you're seeing torture, but depiction and endorsement are two very different things. And if you watch Zero Dark 30 and you listen to the dialogue, it's very clear that the torture doesn't produce anything actionable.
Yeah.
It's just that the characters are all on board. So they're enthusiastic about it. The movie is very, very, very ambivalent about whether or not torture works. But again, if you're trying to discredit something with a whisper campaign because you'd rather, your movie win Best Picture, that's a pretty good hook to hang it on, and people who don't listen will just amplify it. But that's a whole other thing. There's nothing in Blue Steel that is accidental or mistakey.
Well, there's nothing.
But
again, there's nothing really ever in so many of these films that is mistakey or accidental. It's just a question of audiences being ready to hear it. I mean, with Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, I think Zero Dark 30 is probably a better example. We were more conditioned to sort of accept having to see it, whereas with something like Blue Steel, it's like, oh well, no, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's the that was the stupid Rachel Ray, don't yuck my yums. Like, if I want to come and watch a sexy lady with a gun shoot a bad guy, why are you making me think about why no one wants the sexy lady to shoot the bad guy? It's like, well, why are you using the phrase sexy lady? Let's start with that. What are your expectations from this movie? And that is what Bigelow and her co-writer Eric Red, who also wrote Near Dark and The Hitcher, and has some very clear ideas about the use of violence in cinema and what you're who you're supposed to empathize with in a given genre story. Those things are very much first on the mind of everybody making this movie, and Jamie Lee Curtis included. And I am not kidding when I say I think it's the best performance of her career, because she's using everything she has as an actor. She's using her history from the Halloween movies as a damsel in distress, right? Yeah. She's using all of these things to make you plug into what it is she's doing in character, and who Meghan Turner is and where she's coming from. And it also, there's this little moment in it that echoes with the Silence of the Lambs beautifully, that makes me think that Silence of the Lambs is still, a year away or 2 years away. But there's a moment where I'm pretty sure they read the book. Like, what made you get into this? Him. That's straight out of Thomas Harris's novel, but it's also the core of the story. It's about a larger evil or a greater menace to this one woman who is aware of it and uses it to drive herself, but also uses it to save other women and other people in general from this larger threat. And that's the entitled masculine day trader Reagan over, it's all there. It's another Wall Street picture. Really, everybody forgets that too. Yeah. Ron Silver's character is a nebbishy trader who gets his hand on real power when he steals a gun and starts running around killing people with it. And it's a shame of what he became towards the end of his life with the whole conservative thing, but he was a really interesting actor for those roles in that window of time. To watch somebody like just oozing entitlement and still also kind of be likable, just up until he starts killing people. Like, he's sympathetic before he becomes a monster.
No, it's really true. When he slid into sort of that time cop era of performance, we were used to him being a slimeball, but he was right on the precipice with this one. That's right. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
It was the tipping point. It was doing he had Reversal of Fortune on the other side of it, and then Time Cop. But used properly, he could do stuff. He could be really complex and impressive. And I think this is Curtis's film, but Ron Silver's great. Clancy Brown is terrific. It's just Tom Sizemore's in there. He's the robber. Everybody, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But it all works, and it works in this feverish, creepy, unpleasant, slippery, over in 92 minutes kind of experience that is like the quintessential B picture for me. Push me, make me think, make me uncomfortable, and then end on a high.
Can't wait for more people to come out and see it. I mean, this program is running at the Lightbox all month, free for members. Obviously, it's yet another fantastic thing TIFF does for our city and for film fans in general.
Thank you. It's only 8 movies. You can space them out. The first 3 are the first weekend is, I think it's, what is it? Blue Steel on Friday, RoboCop on Saturday, and The Running Man on Sunday.
Fun.
And that's going to be a fun run. That's the 3 sides of late 80s pulp genre cinema. It's what I live for. What can I tell you?
But I mean, on top of that, something else I've got to ask about.
Oh, got it backward. It's Blue Steel, Running Man, RoboCop.
But I mean, just on top of that, I have to ask, Secret Movie Club is coming back.
Yeah, I'm actually sharing.
I know there's going to be movies, but I mean, is there anything sort of on top of that you can hint for audiences?
I actually am not involved in the first 2.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Well, I'm sharing it. I co-host it, and Jane Shuttle is the co-host this year. She's the special presentations programmer for TIFF, and we work closely together. But I am deliberately not involved in October and November because I want to be surprised.
Sweet.
I'm
like
leaving out. I'm leaving myself out of it. I made some suggestions. But I don't know what they're going to pick, and I'm kind of excited to find out. My first one is, I think, December, I want to say the 10th, the week of the 10th, but I don't know. I'm just going to click my way over and make sure. 12th, I think. December 12th is mine. But yeah, October and November are complete question marks for me. I wanted to experience it the way everybody else does.
I love it. You're going in as a fan. I appreciate that, man. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing it for, I think, 7 years, off and on. I mean, I've been hosting for 7 years, and not every screening.
Right.
But I've been part of it since like 2016, I guess. And I'm excited to just not know, and to complain if I get to complain if I want to.
And you know what? I mean, that always makes me laugh because, I mean, and you and I have both had this working on the critical side of the aisle and, writing reviews and doing coverage. There are so many people who are like, oh, what do you think of the trailer? It's like, I didn't watch the trailer. I don't want to fucking know what's going on in the movie before I go see the movie,
Oh, yeah. No, there's no point. I'm in this weird position now where I'm watching incomplete versions of films because that's how they're submitted sometimes.
Of course, yeah.
Visual effects aren't done, dialogue hasn't been looped, and it's fine because my brain is filling. Dog. It's fine because my brain is filling in the blanks, and I'm this is not new. There were days in the old VHS days when we would watch work prints of movies before the festival, but now you're just seeing it on this grand scale, and so I just try not to contaminate myself with what something might look like, or this scene is in it. Why haven't I seen that scene yet? This guy's going to be fine in this scene because he's in the next scene that I haven't seen yet. So I want to be as cold as possible. And yeah, Secret Movie Club was absolutely the one opportunity that people have to be completely in the dark. You may have seen the trailer by the time the movie starts, but we won't tell you what it is. So you're just roll the dice. Buy a ticket, come on down. It's really fun. It's been really fun to expose people to things that they don't expect to be exposed to. I mean, we did Bones and All last year. Was the big kickoff. But the one we closed in 2022 with was Everything Everywhere All at Once, which at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning blew some people's heads off.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
But it was right after South by Southwest. It was the Canadian premiere. It was a huge get for us. And yeah, people a year later got to have bragging rights about being the first audience to see it in Canada because it went on and won a freaking Oscar.
Absolutely, man. But I mean, Norm, as always, thank you for the time today. I mean, just keep up the good work, brother. Seriously, see you in the hallowed halls of the Lightbox. Oh
yeah, I will never be too far from like they gave me keys to a movie theater. Of course, I'm going to keep coming back. No, I'm loving it.
And that sums up the dream for everybody. It's like they gave me keys to a movie theater. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, Norm, just thanks again, man. And honestly, keep up the good work.
Oh, my pleasure.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.